Welcome to Season 7, Episode 286 of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian beginning my 18th year, I knew I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources, so whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. A very happy book birthday to Amanda Jones. Her book, That Librarian, was launched this past week on Tuesday, August 27th, and now is available anywhere you get your books. If you haven't ever visited the show notes of each episode, I'd like to encourage you at this time to take a look at several of the resources you can find there. First of all, the FAQs. These have evolved over the years as I have entertained many questions from listeners and people who are interested in being a guest on the show. And I have tried in detail to give everybody a sense of what it's like to be a guest on the show. It is super casual and apparently fun enough that plenty of people come back and would like to record again and again. It is a really fun experience. And if this is something that interests you, and I'll tell you right now, if you have ever created a presentation to give to other school librarians, like at a state conference or your district, consider it that's the same thing that we do in order to get ready for an episode. So think about it. The other thing you'll find, another fantastic resource, are our playlists. And I think we are up to 27 different playlists. And this is really fun because you're going into season 7. There's more than 280 episodes. How do you organize those in a way that if you're really wanting to do like some targeted listening, like Amy, I don't want to listen to every single one of your episodes, and friends, my feelings are not hurt. There are people who do that. They'll just binge. And do remember that season 1, as with any first year of any effort, it is a little cringe and really just a solo effort on my part to sort of get established as podcaster. Season 2 is when the fun really begins because we start to really bring in that talent and all those voices from school librarians, and the rest is history. So friends, the playlists are a lot of fun. I think we're up to about 27 or 28 of them right now. And if you go, a lot of people like to just sort of bookmark those and put them in their toolbar or ready to access. But we've got the librarian bucket list, which is super fun. If you're looking to push yourself and challenge yourself, you can learn from others. I also have a pride playlist, which is really fun, as well as one called Putting Ourselves First, which is something we don't often do. There is a great playlist on weeding and all the things that come with tackling such a daunting task. It can be daunting. It can also be a lot of fun. Building our PLN, as well as genreification and a makerspace playlist and an AI playlist, which is small but growing. There's also a playlist called Getting a Job. And that's important because you will likely change your job several times during your career, possibly. There's an end of year playlist, which only really applies to those of us as we're shutting down for the year. I've got a graphic novel, manga, anime playlist, as well as a fantastic playlist called Rookie/First Year Librarian. Great sort of, if you want to hit the ground running and you're brand new, this is a great place to start. We also have playlists dedicated by grade level to high school, middle school, and elementary. Please know elementary goes down to pre-K. And that's a really fun episode because I interviewed 2 school librarians whose only job it is to teach pre-K library and work with our very little. So super fun. We also have playlists on staffing and volunteers, putting students first. And that is oftentimes an interview question. What are you doing to make your program student-centered? There's a whole host of episodes on collection development, which is a really fun way to get your feet wet. Digital citizenship is another solid playlist a lot of people like to visit. Our roles, we wear so many hats, and I've really tried to sort of bring all of those episodes into one place because there are so many things that are expected of us. And this is a great way to explore many of those different roles that we support. Overcoming obstacles is at least It's helpful because I don't want to say misery loves company, but we all have obstacles that we have to overcome. And I've tried to bring those together in a way that it would help you if you really are sort of feeling like you are alone and you're struggling. I promise you, you're not. Take a look. Also, we've got a playlist that I hope we don't oftentimes have to visit, and that is the virtual distance or remote playlist, which came together 14 episodes during peak pandemic. I've got a fantastic playlist called Reading Culture, which also is another interview question that we oftentimes see. But we are all sort of challenged with how are we going to build a culture of reading in our spaces. We Are Teachers is another popular playlist because at the end of the day, we are at its very core teachers in our spaces, and how that works is really sort of a fun way to explore. Author visits, programming. I also have a really great playlist of librarians who've been interviewed who don't live in the United States. And I love that. And friends who are tuning in right now from outside of the United States, I'm hoping to build upon this list. Please consider being a guest on the show. I also have a spotlight on state and national conferences, and that is really fun. Anytime I'm lucky enough to attend a conference, I like to interview the school librarians on the ground, those I meet while I'm at a conference. And this is a sort of culmination of the people I was able to connect with. And they oftentimes represent a variety of lived experiences, and they share wonderful resources. So I hope you consider tuning in. Another resource which is linked in the playlist are the search by author, title, and state. And this is just a Google sheet, and you can do one of those F searches, and everything is organized. You can either search by the title of the episode, the guest who appeared on the episode, and even more entertaining are the locations of the guests. So if you want to find out how many school librarians from your state have been on the show, that's an easy search. And by the way, if you don't see anybody having been featured from your state, take that as an invitation to look at our FAQs and see, hey, I'd like to be on the show, and you'll be the first. I hope you consider this. Friends, it is going to be a great season 7, and I am always looking to feature new voices so that we can benefit from everybody's lived experience and learn from one another. Shining a light on the amazing work that school librarians do every day in our spaces is my privilege and ultimately the reason why this podcast exists. And friends, you especially want to make sure to check out today's show notes for Marcia's links and resources. You don't want to miss them. I think you'll know why as soon as you tune into the conversation. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can reach me on Facebook on X, formerly known as Twitter. My handle is @LMS_United, and Threads. You can find me at School Librarians United and on Blue Sky at SLU Podcast, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. And now a word from our sponsor, Capstone. Capstone is an innovative publisher and education technology provider of children's content for school libraries, classrooms, and at-home learning. Home of the award-winning PebbleGo research database, Capstone has a passion for creating inspired learning and intellectual curiosity in children, and I am so excited to be working with them. I'm also grateful to Capstone for their commitment to support the podcast in Season 7. They are offering listeners of School Librarians United a very special discount. Visit shop.capstonepub.com and use the code UNITED to get $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and Capstone interactive ebooks. That's code UNITED for $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and ebooks on shop.capstonepub.com. And now for today's episode, Middle School Manifesto, and my conversation with Marcia Kochel. Marcia Kochel, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
You know, I was so excited to meet you at GLMA Summer Institute. I'm remembering that our friend Robbie Barber sort of brought you to me and introduced you to me and said, you must have Marcia on your show.
Yes, she's an awesome colleague, amazing person. Great to work with her.
Well, and I absolutely trust her. She's been a leading librarian in Georgia for her entire profession. But I knew that I wanted to do this deep dive. I'm so grateful that you have joined us today. And, grateful for what you have shared in terms of this manifesto, which you wrote. I think I've been pretty forthcoming with everyone tuning in that I don't write. It's a chore for me, but your writing is absolutely accessible, and I really appreciated reading it. I included a link in the show notes. So let's get started. Would you introduce yourself to our listening audience? Tell us about your library, the grades you serve, and some of the programs you offer.
Yes, I am in Georgia. I work at Druid Hills Middle School, which is in DeKalb County, Georgia. And we have about 1,000 middle schoolers in grades 6 through 8. And I've been there for 8 years, but I have been a school librarian for 26 years, K through 12. But all but 2 of the years of my 26, I have had middle schoolers in my library. So I am pretty much middle school. They are my favorite. They are my first love, and that's where I belong.
I love hearing that, because when I reach out to these tried and true middle school teachers and educators and school librarians, they have decidedly made it their home. It is their mindset. My sister's a middle school educator, and the idea of going anywhere else is that's a non-starter.
Yes, true for me as well.
So let's go ahead. I'd love to hear, what are some of the things that your space offers? Because there are a lot of listeners tuning in who may not be middle school fans, but they may find themselves, out of sheer necessity, teaching and working in a middle school library, and then consequently learning to love it as you have. Would you give us an idea of some of the real home runs which you have been able to offer in your space, because you are an award-winning librarian?
Yes, I have a great program. I have a very supportive administration right now, and I have a student library leaders class that's a first period class at my school in conjunction with an ELA teacher. And we have 20 some kids that apply for the class. They do all kinds of things. They do all the book displays. They learn Canva, and they do all this graphic design. They come up with our creative stations. We don't call it a maker space. We call it creative space. And we always have hands-on stations, and the kids create the stations. They make scavenger hunts that kids can do. We do mindfulness things. We have arts and crafts. They come up with contests like, 2-sentence horror stories and guess the jelly beans. And so there is always something when you walk in our library. There's always at least 2 thematic book displays. There's something you can do. There's something you can participate in. There's a word search. There's coloring. There's Legos. So we have a very active place. We have about 14 book clubs every year, sort of depending on interest. I put out announcements. If anyone wants to be in a book club, come to the library. And I get huge amounts of kids. We split them into groups. We meet monthly at lunch for most of them. One of them is a weekly after-school book club. And for that group, we have a tradition of having an all-night read-in at the end of the school year. So they spend the night at the library. So we just have a lot of fun things going on. We now have morning activities. We used to kind of be open in the morning, and crowds of kids would come in, and it got a little unruly. So this year I came up with themes. So Monday it's Legos. Tuesday it's paper and book art. Wednesdays it's Tinkercad, 3D printing. Thursdays is we call Dragon Hearts because we're the dragons, but it's doing nice things for others. And on Fridays we do board games. So we have different things every morning. We are very lucky we're in the Atlanta area. We have some local bookstores, and I'm going to name them because Little Shop of Stories is amazing, and Brave and Kind Books is also in my town, which is a Black-owned bookstore, and they send us authors. And there's also a foundation called Page Turners Make Great Learners that works with diverse authors to get them into Title I schools, which we are. So we have had incredible author visits. I do a lot of book talks. I love book talking. I read middle school books like crazy. So we have a lot going on.
People take notice. Obviously, your administration adores you. Your teachers have come to rely on you as a partner in learning and guiding these young people through what can oftentimes be a very challenging age group to support and love. They can be a little quirky sometimes and incredibly needy in their very own adoring ways. But I love that I got to tell you, if we don't scare you off today, and someday you'd like to come and talk about any of those many impactful programs, please know the door is always open. Friends, what will not surprise you, and it certainly didn't surprise me when I started learning more and more about Marcia, is that she has been recognized for all of this excellence on the local level and the national stage. You've been awarded the I Love My Librarian Award in 2017. You've received the Georgia Library Media Specialist of the Year Award in 2021. You are currently serving on the Cybert Book Award Committee. But what I really want to hear about today is your innovative way of raising funds for a library renovation that you oversaw.
Yes, I came to my current school 8 years ago, and it is a former high school built in 1969, and nothing had changed since then. It had very tall wooden shelves, heavy wooden tables. There was nowhere for students to sit. There were books from, 50 years ago, and I did a huge amount of weeding, but we needed new furniture. There was no way we were going to get a real renovation, but I knew from past, I have worked in several schools where I have updated furniture and carpet and made things nice and kind of brought us into the Learning Commons era. So I knew we needed to do that right away. And there was no money. This is a Title I public school. There was not money. And I also knew coming in there, I knew that the Indigo girls, this had been their high school. Amy Ray and Emily Salyers, this is where they went to high school. And I knew that Emily Salyers' mother was a librarian. They support literacy. And I had a halftime library assistant at the time who was a huge Indigo Girls fan. And we both knew this. And this was in the back of our minds. We were like, wouldn't it be amazing if they would help us? They do fundraisers regularly. After a couple years of maybe even only a year, we got plans drawn up. We got ready for it, and we knew how much money we needed. And we made contact, and actually students made a big poster and wrote asking them, and we have found a way to get it to Amy Ray. And we made this, student-made poster, and we told them how diverse and interesting our student body was. And it's really changed over the years. When they went to that school, it was not this racially diverse school with a lot of immigrants and languages spoken. And now it is, and it has a lot more needs, I think. So we sent them a poster, and I got a phone call over the summer from their agent saying, they're going to do it. Give me a call. It all happened from August when we started talking to them. They booked a concert for us in December of, I think it was 2018. And we requested to have the concert at our school, which they were willing to do. I mean, they usually do these things at another venue, but we said, there's a whole community built around this high school that loves them. They are from here. They are known here. They live here. We did all aspects. It was amazing. We got a parent group pulled together, and we charged for parking in the parking lot. We had a VIP reception in the library. People paid $100 a ticket. They let us give 100 tickets at $100, and they could come into the library and meet them. That was before the concert, I think. We had, maybe 900 tickets sold at the regular level. We had floor seating and side seating. We made merch. They let us make bags and T-shirts and cups. We did everything we could do to make money off this event, including the ticket sales. So it was amazing. We were able to get everything on our list, and we had a beautiful plan drawn up. And our library is really beautiful now. So it was an amazing, once-in-a-lifetime thing that no one else could ever replicate, but...
I'm sorry to disappoint listeners. I would not bother taking notes because it is unlikely that you will have the same kind of success that Marcia has, given the absolutely unique set of circumstances that you had. So, Marcia, I have to tell you, I absolutely died when I saw that you had the Indigo Girls present at the school where you currently teach. But we're learning, the more you and I talk, is that our relationship with the Indigo Girls is one that goes way back. For some of our younger listening audience, you may have been introduced to the Indigo Girls because of the Barbie movie, and that's cute. But I'm old enough, and apparently Marcia is too, to have seen them in their much earlier, phase of their profession. I saw the Indigo Girls in 1992 at Hill Auditorium in Ann Arbor on the University of Michigan campus with my then boyfriend. And I did drag him. I don't think he was at all interested in attending this concert. But that is my earliest memory of the Indigo Girls is 1992.
And my first date with my husband, who I've been with for 30 years now, was an Indigo Girls concert in the early 90s in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It was their Swampophilia tour, and that was our first date. And so the Indigo Girls have meant a lot to me over the years. I've been to a lot of concerts, and I've moved around quite a bit. But when we had to move to Georgia, I told my husband, I will move to Georgia if we can live in Decatur, because the Indigo Girls are from there.
I'm sorry. I think that's so much fun. And it really does. It's a happy coincidence, but isn't it remarkable what you were able to do? And I know librarians do this all around the world, is that we tap the resources we have available at our disposal. And for each of us, that's a unique set of skills. That's those relationships, the contacts that we build, and also pulling from our community, the immediate community that surrounds us, and recognizing the opportunities that our surrounding community can then lend to support our community and our school community writ large. So good for you for putting yourself out there, because I don't know, I would have been absolutely terrified. And friends, I am sorry that this opportunity is not available to you, but it is a good example of the potential that can happen when we take those risks, those risks, and put yourself out there, be vulnerable and ready for rejection. But know that at its heart, the beneficiaries of this risk are our students and our school program. And clearly you made an excellent gamble. So thank you for sharing.
I will add, we did collaborate with our chorus teacher, who was brand new, and the chorus got to sing with the Indigo Girls. So we involved a bunch of students in the concert who had no idea who the Indigo Girls were. But there are amazing videos on the Indigo Girls Facebook page from December 2018 of them singing with our chorus, and I will send you some of those links. They're very fun to watch.
Yes, I'm fiercely jealous and also incredibly excited for you at the same time. So the reason why I'm so grateful you're joining us today, Marcia, you recently wrote an impassioned plea, a manifesto, in support of middle school books, which was shared out on School Library Journal's Teen Librarian Toolbox. Your frustration had clearly hit a boiling point. Was there anything in particular which set you off and inspired this, well, we'll call it a tirade, a diatribe, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, but it was a manifesto. You were clearly provoked, and you were responding in the way that you can because you write beautifully.
There was not one thing. It just has been building and building. And I just thought, am I the only one? Am I crazy? Like, there used to be books for middle schoolers, including The Hunger Games and Twilight. There were all these things that were lower YA, I guess. But I just kept seeing middle grade is third and fourth graders, and young adult is about 18-year-olds who are sexually active. There's no other way to put it. There's just not that middle ground anymore. And it's just been building. And when I saw Karen Jensen's treatise on the state of middle grade and young adult publishing that she posted, I thought, oh, she said it. She did it for me. I was going to write that. That was my article. But then I realized, I have more to say. I have a demand of what I want. So I just piggybacked on her wonderful article that she wrote earlier.
Well, and, giving credit where credit is due. And friends, we've included links to both Marcia's manifesto, and we've included a link to Karen Jensen's treatise on the state of middle grade and young adult publishing. And it's important because our thoughts don't have to be completely and uniquely separate and distinct from others. Building on what other people have done, and then obviously giving them credit is the right way that we move forward with any kind of problem we're trying to solve. I know, I will say, as someone who has never worked in a middle school library, you're absolutely right. When I do book talks for my high schoolers, the vast majority of books that I book talk have all take place in that sweet spot between junior and senior year. And then it sort of progresses through their senior year, as if things that happen in freshman and sophomore year really don't matter. And it's very hard to find books that I can, book talk to my students with younger protagonists. And then they all come in and say, I want Colleen Hoover and new adult books. I don't have that kind of money. I just don't.
Right. And I will say I had some great feedback. Andy Spinks, who's also a Georgia librarian, he's a high school librarian. He responded to my manifesto and he said, I will order all these books too. They will not just make money from middle school librarians. If they write murder, horror, shorter books, funny books that will appeal to 13 and 14 and 15-year-olds, every high school in America also wants those books. So to just call it a middle school issue isn't quite right, but I think one of the problems we have is that we don't have a word for these middle teenagers. It is not middle grade, and it is not young adult. There is not a word.
Well, and I don't think, especially because the more I've come to engage with a lot of middle school librarians, I'm talking to librarians who, in some cases, teach 6, 7, 8, or a 5th, 6th, or a 7, 8, or a 7, 8, 9, you name it, across this country and around the world, how we put this age into a learning space differs wildly across the country and around the world. So we do have to be very aware that the needs of this group I'm not going to say are unique, but they aren't young adults. They're not elementary, they're not primary students. Ideally, they're reading about protagonists who are somewhere even just remotely close to being their age.
Yes, they are just not categorized in our society. I think people are scared of it. I mean, the general public thinks middle school, junior high, that age kids they think it was the worst years of their life. They think it's the worst years of these kids' lives. They don't want to go back there. They don't want to remember. They think it's bizarre that people want to work with them. So maybe that's part of it too. There's sort of a fear and loathing of middle schoolers.
I do feel like in one case, like from what I remember of Diary of a Wimpy Kid, seems to revel in that awkwardness and seems to revel in many of the unpleasant aspects of being in school and growing up. But you're right. Myself trying to remember those years, sometimes we try and bury those.
Right.
We work pretty hard to remember, all those sort of cringe times in our lives we'd rather not remember. And yet, for our students to be able to see themselves authentically and legitimately on the pages of a book and feel seen, we need to have content. And I think I'm grateful because I know you're going to mention that there are some authors that you really feel do a rock solid job of doing this. We just need more content. Volume-wise, literally and figuratively, we need more to be able to provide for our students. You have worked with middle schoolers for your entire career. What are you hearing from them when this topic comes up? Because you have a regular opportunity to engage with a core group of readers, and clearly the reading culture at your building is thriving.
Yes, I will. Number one, graphic novels, anime and manga, but graphic novels. And there is so much coming out in the graphic novel format. So I would say there's just been a massive, massive shift toward graphic novels. But when I ask, what do kids want? They want murder mysteries. They want actual murder. They don't want a mystery where, like, something needs to be solved. They want a murder.
Like, or when the dog goes missing.
Right? That's not what they mean.
The dog is missing. That's a mystery. No, it's not.
No, they actually want a murder mystery. They want more romance on all kinds of levels. I'm fortunate to be in a place where I can have LGBTQ romances without a problem, but they don't need romance that's 18-year-olds having a romance. They always want funny. I mean, these kids come back and back and back to Wimpy Kid books, and there is nothing for them after that. There just isn't. There might be individual novels that might be funny, But to have a series that you love, and I said this in my manifesto, like if someone out there could write wimpy kid books for a notch up, they would be a millionaire. Like, just be the next Jeff Kinney for a little bit older age group. There's a huge demand, high schools, middle schools, everybody wants funny, and funny is so hard to come by. So murder, romance, funny, and shorter books. Kids today, they are intimidated by 300 pages and everything is 300 pages. So shorter books, they do like books in verse. I usually don't call them books in verse. I open them up and show them the page and I say, this doesn't have a lot of words on the page, so you can read it faster. Because I don't want to peg it as poetry, because that's not going to fly.
I totally agree. In fact, I've now, with my novels in verse, I've actually created a resource list in Destiny, because I regularly have students who have to come in. And I'm going to tell you right now, the high school teachers that I work with create page minimums because they have learned that students are going to go for the shortest possible, the thinnest book in my collection. But the interesting and rather deceptive thing about novels in verse is they're not skinny. They're fast reads. They're very fast reads. So I've actually, when I do my book reads, I've pulled those aside and done the fan out and shown them and say, this book takes 3 hours to read. And the reason why I know that is I've listened to the audiobook, and it does only, it can be 300 pages long, but if it's a novel in verse, and I said, by the way, when you listen to an audiobook, it's not also scrolling Instagram. It's not going to stop and get interrupted all the time by, conversations with your friends or posting on social media. If you listen to an audiobook that's a novel in verse, it's usually about 3 hours long. That's like, and I show them that and they're like, what? And I was like, yeah, that book took 3 hours to read, but I wasn't doing 5 other things at the same time. And so, yeah, I've tried to be more intentional about not only buying more novels in verse, but also delineating them in a resource list so that when those teachers come down and say, I've got some students, we have to read a book that's at least 200 pages long, I'm going to also grab those and say, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Yes. And I've made my own Destiny collection, and I call it, I think it's Novels in Verse, Like Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds, because that's the beloved novel in verse. They don't care that it's in verse. They care that it's a great story that they can read a little bit faster.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, when you talk about romance, I love that you mentioned that. We've had Lori Lieberman on the show this past winter because she has the romance book club in her high school. And I know that it can raise some concerns when you mention that you're reading about romance. But I think that there definitely is a need because, we have a willing audience of readers who would like to read about students like themselves. And, relationships and budding relationships in middle school is not unusual. All you have to do is open your eyes and realize that this is something that would obviously speak to them on a personal level.
And middle schoolers, they do want to read about kids that are a little older than them. So I'm perfectly open. Like, give me a romance between 9th and 10th graders. But the problem is those YA romances, they're 17 or 18 always. They're applying to college. They are ready to go. And they are in another world of romance. I had a very funny comment on the School Library Journal page where my manifesto was posted. A few people commented, and one woman said, yes to romance. We need more than, I believe she worded it like, we need more bases. Like, let's not just talk about the home run. We need more bases.
No, just more first base, more second base. Yes, no. The term I heard was sweet reads, like a sweet read, something like that. But that keeps it rather, I don't like to use like movie terms, but like PG. This is very PG, very PG-13.
The term clean, people don't like that because that's implying it's dirty.
That it's dirty.
I know in the adult world, they talk about open door and closed door. But in middle school, I think we just need more sweet. We need more bases.
Yes, more bases to the relationship, fewer home runs.
Exactly it.
Yes. Well, and that was, I think, one of the fun things I know I learned right away when my fifth grader, my child, wanted to read the Twilight series that was coming out as she was in fifth grade. And I said, tell you what, I'm going to stay a book ahead of you. And, she was a prolific reader. But what I discovered when she did read the Twilight series is that she understood about 80% of it. And the nuance went right over her head. And she read those books as they were coming out. I stayed a little bit ahead of her so we could talk about it. And again, I'm glad that she was excited to read something that she saw everybody else reading. And that's really fun. And you have that sort of, a collective experience. But appreciate that when you start skipping the bases and hitting those home runs, even in paranormal romances, that sometimes that's going to go right over the heads of the kids.
Yeah. I remember reading Twilight when I was working in Minnesota, still with middle schoolers. And I was thrilled because I'm listening to it and I'm like, yes, they can't do it because he would kill her. Like, this is a book where it can't happen. And I know it happened later.
Yeah, but then we figured it out. Yeah.
In the first one, I was like, yes, we will give this to sixth graders because this is a romance that cannot be consummated.
There you go. And again, from your lips to God's ears, wouldn't it be nice if we could get some of those middle grade authors and aspiring authors who are looking for that sweet spot to find an audience? Well, newsflash, there is an audience. And I agree. So, let's address some of the forces which have created this problem in the first place.
Okay.
So go for it.
I got a lot of insight from a chance encounter I had at Little Shop of Stories, my local bookstore. I went to an author visit. Nick Stone was interviewing an author upstairs. So I went to that presentation. I was downstairs afterwards talking with a couple of middle school librarians, and I was ranting, there are no books for middle school. Middle grade books are too young. They're too realistic. They're too sweet. I was going on, and Nick Stone was standing right behind me, and she jumped in. She's like, I want to hear what you're talking about. She said, she gave me incredible insight. She said, if I go to my publisher and say, I want to write a book with a 13 or 14-year-old protagonist, they will tell me no. They will tell me it has to be middle grade. And by that, they mean third and fourth grade. It has to be appropriate for third and fourth grade, or it has to be young adult and like people in their 20s will want to read it. And that's where it hit me. I was like, oh, it's not the authors, it's the publishers. And she even said, they will say parents buy books for third and fourth graders, and young adults, literal young adults, 18 to 25-year-olds have money and buy books. Publishers will say 13-year-olds and our kids in the middle don't have money. No one's buying those books. And they will steer you that way. And then it started to hit me like, there's an Angie Thomas tweet from way back that says, I want to write a new fantasy book for the middle school age, but I'm being told basically it has to be young adult or middle grade. And she ended up going middle grade, going young. And it's a fine book, but if she didn't write it, I'm sure she got told, oh, make it for third graders and then you can build up. But I think it is truly a financial publishing decision, and they probably have a department for middle grade and a department for young adult, and they think that's good enough. They think, oh, well, we'll just do upper middle grade and we'll do lower young adult. But in reality, there isn't that much, and they're not hitting the mark a lot of the time.
Something that I've noticed, again, is this, I'm getting requests from students for new adult books. And I have, my understanding of new adults are, you've got sort of college and up to 30. So you're looking at kids who are in their 19, 20, up to before they, about 29. And it's hard for me because I have such a modest budget that I can only really afford to buy books whose protagonists are like in high school, as opposed to have already left high school and the adventures that they have in their early 20s. But it seems to me like that phenomenon is also mirrored in your middle school, in that they are also looking for if the main characters are their age or just a little bit older, but they're not interested in reading protagonists who are in the 5th grade.
Definitely. And every middle grade book I open, it seems like they're 12. And that's fine. We need books about 12-year-olds. We do. But when you are 12, you want 13, 14, 15. And I will tell you, middle school girls walk around with Colleen Hoover books as well. And I read a few last summer because I'm like, I need to know what's going on here. And I was like, okay, no question, I will not be getting Colleen Hoover. But everybody wants to age up. But it would be nice if we could age them up by 2 years instead of by 15 years.
I'm remembering when I was in high school. So between middle school and high school, I would regularly get a subscription to 17 magazine. And it was a present. I don't know, from my aunt or from my, I don't know who gave it to me, but I got a subscription. But I got to tell you, once I turned 17, all of a sudden I was like, I'm 17, reading at 17. No, I need to move on to Vogue. I need to move on. I mean, it was ridiculous. It was dumb now that I think about it, but it's totally that. Like when I was 13, 14, 15, absolutely. 16 years old, I'm going to read that 17 magazine. Once you turn 17, I'm done. I'm out.
Yeah. It's not for a 17-year-old.
Oh my goodness. Well, and I wanted to point out, like, Book Talk is incredible. Book Talk has moved and manipulated our current publishing industry. Or let's put it this way. Our publishing industry is aware of the power that Book Talk has to sway readers in such a way. And so I'm really, grateful, because it has made my job as a high school librarian immensely easier. I can go to Book Talk and look at all these titles. Many of these will be home runs with my students. And if you have to make choices, it's an interesting way to sort of bring those readers in, because it's been seen on Book Talk. So I will say, while I am not aware of a middle school or middle grade Book Talk or equivalent to the Book Talk that's out there on TikTok, I will say eTrain Talks is one resource which I have been made aware of through my conversations with other school librarians, middle school librarians, because of the focus on the middle grade age group when it comes to readership. Given time, this may also have some sort of sway on and catch the attention of some publishers, but I think it's really sort of early in being able to see if it has any sort of impact.
Yeah, and it's a little dicey with social media and middle schoolers. I know that they're on TikTok, they're on Instagram, but boy, is there a major pushback against social media for middle schoolers for mental health reasons. And, there's a new book out called The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, which is really pointing out, the rates of anxiety and depression in kids, and how that correlates to middle schoolers getting cell phones. And so I'm iffy on whether I don't do library content on TikTok. I do library content on Instagram, and I'd be happy to do more book content there, but all kids aren't there, and some of their parents are wisely not letting them be there. So it's also not a clear place for that to be going on.
I'd like the suggestion you mentioned, and that was using a tactic similarly to We Need Diverse Books. And I like that. Would you share with listeners your idea?
Yeah, I have been thinking We Need Diverse Books was so successful and made humongous changes. And I don't want to, I've thought a hashtag We Need Middle School Books. That's what came to my mind. I don't want to steal their hashtag, and I don't want to make it sound like my issue is nearly as important as their issue of diversity. But it would be kind of fun to pull together middle school librarians and book advocates into kind of the same sort of thing. Let's start a little movement. Let's have a hashtag. Let's make sure whenever we read a book that's truly good for middle school, that gets that hashtag, and that people who are looking for middle school books have a place to go. So I'm thinking maybe if we could pull together some other people, like-minded people who read a lot of books, and if we can highlight the ones that are great and get them more book sales, then maybe publishers will notice. But if anyone out there is interested in maybe brainstorming how we could put together a movement, my contact information will be at the end of the podcast. I would be interested in helping start that, but I am not a social media maven, and I would love, the kind of people that know how to get followers and drum up attention. It would be interesting to do. I have an old-fashioned book blog. I have blogged like every middle school book I've read for the last, maybe 15 years, and that link will be there too. I still do it. It helps me keep track of what I've read. It's on my library website if people want recommendations. Parents look at it. I know kids aren't, following my blog, but I do love to keep track of everything I've read, that, I put my thoughts down.
Absolutely. Well, and I truly, friends, if you are a middle school librarian, and I think that it would be certainly more impactful if your core group were middle school librarians. So friends, I hope you do take advantage of all the amazing resources which Marcia has so generously shared in our show notes. And I never discourage anybody from reaching out. Our guests are amazing. They've agreed to be on the show because they feel passionately about the things that we always discuss on the show. And so reaching out to our guests is a great way for you to build those connections and obviously have, take this conversation to another level, which would be absolutely amazing. I know when we talk about middle school, we can't ignore this idea of decline by 9. And I know that it's not a new idea. It's one that we've been very aware of. But for listeners who are tuning in, can you give us an idea of what is this phenomenon, this decline by 9? And really, you've spent your life sort of trying to work to correct that.
Yeah, and I get kids well after 9 years old. So if the decline has happened at 9, that's a real problem. But I'm generally getting them in 6th grade when they're 10 at the youngest, probably 11. And I know it's true, and I've seen it. Cell phones make reading very hard. They make focusing on any one thing very hard. And I am having trouble literally sitting down reading a book this summer. And I am scrolling more on Instagram. I know it. It's happening to me. And if it's happening to me, who's a reading nut, kids they're up against difficult odds in the phone world. But I think, this isn't news, but it's giving them choice. It's having books that they want. It's having books that are fun and that they choose for themselves. Choice is everything, and making it really, really enticing. I want my library to be a wonderland of books, and I want them to come in and go, oh, it's so beautiful. You have every graphic novel I've ever heard of. And that's what we do. And we push. I'm book talking all the time. There are displays. There are separate graphic novel sections, separate manga section. Everything's face out that we can do. It's still hard, but having high interest is a huge thing. If I can hold up a bunch of skinny books and say, these are really scary horror books, that will sell. Like somebody actually gets murdered in this book. And sometimes I warn them. I pretend like I'm warning them, but I'm really enticing them. I'm like, now I want you to know there's actually a swear word. There's a bad word in this book, so you might not want to read it. And they're like, please give it to me. And, same thing. There's an actual murder in this book, or, this is a book about, and I say, this is a book that's, there are some very good books about sexual harassment in middle school. There are a couple very good ones. And I talk about those out loud because kids hear like, this is a book about sexual harassment and it can happen even in 7th grade. Boom. The book will go. You give it a controversial topic.
I think that there are so many people who recognize that the social emotional needs of our middle school students are real, and it's not like they get better when they're in high school. And what better way to address some of those issues than in the safe confines of the pages of a book? And in addition to having this agency and choice and this beautiful collection which you make available to them, we have to give the students opportunities to read in school. And when it is assigned, like homework, that is not the message we should be giving to our students. We should be building into the school calendar and the school daily, time that we have our students, carve out designated times to read independently, because like anything, they're not going to do this certainly with the same kind of interest when it's assigned to them like homework.
No, and I heard a great analogy. They said, if we think that reading and math are these two big skills they need in school, we would never say, math is really important and you should go home and do it for 2 hours a night. No, we do math in school.
Yes.
So if we think reading is really important, we need to do reading in school and give them time to do it, because they are not. Some kids will go home and read, yes, but we would never say, oh, go do all your math at home. No, we give them a whole period of math and we give them time to do the problems. More time to read is always better.
The analogy I learned was about, students learning how to play an instrument. You don't just hand the instrument to them and say, now go home and practice this, without that opportunity in school to practice where it's guided and there are supports in place. And it is done so incrementally in a way that students can build that facility and that confidence to then do some of that at home. But you would not just send the instrument home and say, Godspeed, have fun. It's like, no, absolutely not.
Exactly.
You're very blunt in your manifesto. Your demands of the industry are a wish list of sorts. For the publishers moving forward, imagine you're addressing a lecture hall of aspiring authors. What is this recipe for success when it comes to capturing the middle school reading audience?
Well, I would start off by saying middle schoolers have incredible ability for abstract thought. They are captured by ideas that are not elementary school level ideas. So there can be evil in the world. The future can be bad. This is the first time they're going to get a book that says the world might be changing. The world could be ending. There could be devastation from all kinds of sources, and you might have to survive. They are ready for it, and they want that. Kids are open to the fact that it's a scary world. They know this. They want to be led into this. Adults can be evil. We might have environmental destruction. There could be a war. They're ready for tough concepts, bad things to happen. They're ready to have their minds blown. My best example ever is Neil Shusterman's Unwind Dystology. It is the greatest book to give to a 7th or 8th grader, because you just get up in front of them and you say, this is a story about, they've really solved a big problem in this society because they've found a way to get rid of unwanted teenagers. And if you're just like a bad kid, when you turn 13, your parents can send you to be unwound, and they're giving your body parts to more deserving people. And isn't that a great idea? It's fantastic. These are 13-year-olds whose society has said, we would rather give your body parts to someone else. You're not good. And the kids are on the run from this society. It's great. And you would not want to give that kid this book to a 3rd or 4th grader. To me, the definition of a good middle school book is you would never want to give it to a little kid. It's got something in it that's a little bit mind-blowing, and it is just different. So, blow their minds, age them up a little bit. Don't make a sweet, pat ending. Don't make a book that seems like there's something mystical or fantastical, but in the end, it was all a dream, or there's an explanation. Like, age them up. And you know what? Just, people don't need to have sex in the book. Everybody doesn't have to get drunk, and a couple of swear words maybe, but just not a zillion. That's all I ask. Like, just take out some of that stuff. I've heard this term of like the 6-word edit. Like, if I could just take some books and edit out 6 words, that book would have been great for middle school. And I'm never going to go cross out words. I would never do that. But boy, I sometimes sit and think, well, did they just add those things in to like get their PG-13 rating? Because if they just took out 6 words, I could give this to my kids.
I'm feeling incredibly ill-informed. The 6-word edit. I have never heard of this concept before, so I'm revealing my ignorance for everybody. But no, just give us a little bit more. Unpackage the 6-word edit, because I like where you're going, but I'll admit I'm clueless.
Okay, I've only heard it. I am a big fan of What Should I Read Next podcast with Ann Bogle. Adult, fantastic book for adult reader, or podcast for adult readers. She has mentioned it. Maybe she came up with this by herself, but she will sometimes say, I believe it's 6-word edit. She'll just say, ooh, if I could have just, and I think sometimes for her, it's like a super spicy romance or something. And she's like, that was more than I wanted to read, but if I could have just, I would have taken out those words and I would have been fine. And that has resonated with me. I truly don't know if that is a concept for anyone else. I should give her credit for it. But sometimes I'm reading a book, and a young adult book, and I'm like, there was just that one moment where they went upstairs to her bedroom. If I could just scratch that, that would have been great for 8th graders.
Well, and I'm thinking, now that you mention it, there's Hyacinth, who does a lot of writing about kids growing up in Florida, and there's the environmental impact. And every once in a while, he'll throw out a swear word. And I'm kind of like, it didn't add to the conversation. It did remind us that he's trying to go for a slightly older audience, I think, because I've had students hold those books aloft and say, Mrs. Herman, this book has HE double hockey sticks in the page. Do you want me to show you where it is on the page? And I'm like, you're okay. If you don't want to read that book, you don't have to. But yes, I'm aware that HE double hockey sticks is in that book.
Yes, and I mean, I'm sure elementary librarians want to edit out the middle school books, and middle school librarians want to edit out the high school books, and high school librarians probably want to edit out the new adult books, but we all have the problem.
You do offer a nod to current middle grade authors who are consistently doing an excellent job of providing middle grade reading materials to our middle school readers. Who are these authors, and share what it is you think they're doing right?
Okay, I pointed out several in my manifesto, and I'll mention them briefly here. I already mentioned Neil Shusterman. He just consistently writes for sort of middle teenagers. He has all kinds of topics and things, but his Scythe series, his Unwind series are just incredible books for 7th and 8th grade on up through high school. He blows your mind. He gives you so much to think about and talk about, but just doesn't go into all the sort of inappropriate things that we don't need in books for middle schoolers. And Gordon Corman has written hundreds of books. He skews toward middle grade sometimes, but he very consistently writes funny books, 7th and 8th graders. He's got humor. He's got some serious books like Linked. His Mastermind series is a great middle school book because you can just tell kids, these kids are growing up and they find out that everything was a lie. Their parents are not their parents. And that is the greatest concept. What? That was the face on the milk carton issue, years ago. Gordon Corman is awesome. I also mentioned Scott Rankin, who wrote the Nixia science fiction series. I don't think that series has gotten enough love. It is a great science fiction series about a kid from Detroit and going off into space. There's battles and fighting, but it's a really great intro to sci-fi with lots of excitement and nothing that would make it inappropriate for a middle schooler. And our kids just absolutely adore that book. Want to mention Jarrett Krasoska's graphic novels, Hey Kiddo and Sunshine, are fantastic for middle schoolers. Hey Kiddo deals with a mom who's addicted to drugs. There is some swearing in it that only makes it more appealing to middle schoolers. I think it's solidly not an elementary school, but Hey Kiddo and Sunshine are great. Long Way Down and the Miles Morales books by Jason Reynolds and some others. Jason Reynolds is amazing. Black Brother by Jewel Parker Rhodes is a consistent middle school hit. Kids have been loving some survival books this year, especially 96 Miles by J.L. Esplin has been a hit. There's one called Alone by Megan Freeman, which is a little more middle grade, but boy, the idea of I'm alone and there are no adults and I have to survive on my own, and it's a novel in verse. That's a great one. The Jerry Crafts new kid books, which go through 7th and 8th and 9th grades, have been great. And I also I kind of harken back. I feel like there was a golden age of books that were very big hits. Maze Runner and Hunger Games. And in one of the Twilight years, in those years, they were huge hits. Alex Rider books were very big. They weren't racially diverse, but and books now are much more racially and culturally diverse, which is great. But those books were, they were kind of mind-blowing. They were action-packed. They had middle teenage protagonists, maybe 15, 16-year-old protagonists. And, they weren't afraid to have violence and have bad things happen to characters. And you certainly didn't want to hand those books to your little kids. But they really struck a nerve with kids. The sort of the wave of dystopian books really struck a nerve with middle school kids.
I'm thinking of the Haddix books.
Yes, yes.
I think when I was training to be a librarian, I remember reading a lot of Haddix and going, "Oh, this is a little edgy for some of our students," and yet that it definitely would reach a desired audience. But I think they also there needs to be something more contemporary, something a little more updated, because I don't know how well it would age.
Yes, and her books really were great middle school level books, and they were not that long. That was another huge bonus of Margaret Peterson Haddix. She wrote some skinny books. So
absolutely. What do you feel is something school librarians can do to affect change when it comes to the dearth of available middle school books?
I'm really not sure, because I think most of us are reading the book, facilitating book clubs, getting to know what kids want, purchasing books. But when the books just aren't there, you can't read them and purchase them. I think we need to organize. I think we need to get a group together, get some publicity around this issue. And I think we need to stop calling it middle grade. I think people assume middle grade, we're covered. But I think we need a new word, and we need to advocate for it. And I don't honestly think middle school is probably the right word. That's going to alienate the ninth graders who might want to read this category. Help us think of a new name. Help us come up with a hashtag. I think we need to push it on social media, I guess, to try to get some notice from publishers or maybe authors. If authors say, I am writing a book about a 14-year-old and you can't stop me, if a tried and true author says that, maybe a publisher will let him do it. But I guess we need to advocate. I don't know. My sort of dream was that I would write my manifesto and some publisher would contact me and say, come advise us on what we can do to fulfill your needs. But that did not happen.
Well, and it still might. I certainly, if anybody is able to articulate what truly is needed out there, it is somebody like yourself. Again, I can't say this strongly enough, friends. When guests come on the show, it's because they feel passionately about these topics. And more than anything, wouldn't it be great to see this build into something larger than, say, the handful of librarians who have come across this phenomenon and said, oh, but what can I do to change an industry? Oh, well, actually, there's a lot. We are the ones who are doing the purchasing when it comes to providing books for our students to read. Friends, I am so grateful. Marcia Kochel, you are incredibly generous. It is our summer vacation right now, after all. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise. Listeners will want to include you in their virtual PLN. Would you let us know what is your preferred social media platform?
Yes, my Twitter is @Marcia Kochel. You could contact me there. My email will be in the show notes. Reach out to me if you're interested. I really think maybe we can pull together a group and do some brainstorming, but we'll leave links to the things we talked about and those ways to contact me. And I would love to talk with more middle school librarians. I think we're a unique subset, and maybe if we can come together, we can figure out some ways to make some change.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I appreciate all you've done to help further this cause. And I hope you have a fantastic rest of your summer.
Thank you. Same to you.
Friends, if you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Reviews help others find us. Use the code UNITED to take advantage of Capstone's generous $20 discount off an order of $100 or more. See the link in today's show notes. The topic of our next episode will be Just Read It, and my conversation with author Jared Amato and 2 school librarians and former guests on the show, Natalie Daly and Stephanie Wilson. I hope you will tune in.